Back everyone for today's video. We are going to be taking a look at a game that was played in the evening title Tuesday on April 23rd, 2024 between myself and the 5 times world chess champion Magnus Carlsen. Now yesterday you guys got a recap when I played against Magnus in the early title Tuesday. That was a very closely contested matchup which ended in a draw, but in the evening title Tuesday Magnus was back in action once again trying to win the event. And sure enough, we squared off once again. Now, in this game, much like in the morning title Tuesday, I get the white pieces, and perhaps that could give me an advantage. But one of the big questions, do we try to meme? Do we try to play serious chess? What exactly is going to happen? So without further ado, let's jump right into the action. So the game starts off with the move e4. Magnus this time decides to play c6. I go knight c3, and here he plays the move g6. Now, normally Magnus Carlsen plays the move d5 here, which of course is the classic Caro Kann. Magnus instead decides to play g6 here, probably intending down the road to play d5, followed by the fianchetto of the bishop to g7. So after g6, I basically pre-moved with knight f3. We get bishop g7, and now I play the move d4. Here, Magnus plays move d5, and now I play this move e5. Now, in this position, Magnus plays f6, and you're probably thinking to yourself, wait a second, but isn't there this famous term, Benjamin Feingold, who says never push your f-pawn? And sure enough, you would be correct. Benjamin has said this on many occasions, but one of the big differences is that at the top level, you learn 1,000 rules, and then you learn how to break every single one of them. Now, f6 is actually a very logical move at the high level, because when you look at this position, the bishop is behind this pawn wall. These pawns on d4 and e5 control a lot of real estate here in the center of the board. And when you play f6, you're trying to chip away at the center, but also you want to develop your knight to f6 as well. So here I play this move pawn takes pawn. Magnus captures with the knight, and now I play the move bishop e2. Magnus castles, I castle, and here he plays this move queen d6. Now, already here when I was live streaming this game, I felt like I had messed up the position a little bit. I didn't think I was actually better here at this point in the game, but after Magnus played queen d6, and I now got to play the move knight e5, I was feeling very, very groovy because I get this nice bastion in the center of the board, which I can overprotect with these pawns on d4 and f4. Magnus plays knight bd7. I go f4, of course, and now he plays the move knight b6. Here I play a4, trying to harass the knight by pushing the pawn to a5 and kicking the knight away from the square. So, of course, Magnus plays a5 to stop that, and now I play this move b3 here. This is a move that is designed to have a couple of purposes. First of all, the pawn chain guards itself. Additionally, the pawn on b3 stops the knight from jumping to c4, and I can also develop the bishop on this long diagonal to target the queen, the pawn, and the rook. So, in this position, Magnus goes bishop f5, I play bishop a3, queen c7, and here I play bishop d3. Now, in this position, Magnus finds a very, very good move, which is knight to c8, intending to reroute his knight to d6. Now, one of the big drawbacks of putting the pawns on f4 and d4 here is that there is an open square available on e4 for black to put a knight or a bishop. So I go knight e2, Magnus plays knight d6, and now I play this move knight to g3. Magnus plays e6 here, solidifying this bishop on f5, also protecting the pawn on d5, and intending to put something on e4 very, very soon. Here I go c4, we get bishop takes bishop, queen takes, and now Magnus plays rook fe8. Here I decide to trade the bishop for the knight because I really don't want black to get this knight to e4, because here with the knights on e5 and e4, I don't really see how white can be better because this knight is permanently lodged on the square, and I can't really remove the knight without sacking the rook and giving up some material. So here I decide to trade the bishop for the knight. Now, of course, the knight on g3 prevents this knight from coming to e4. And at this point, I feel like the position is fairly balanced. So I go c5. Magnus plays queen c7. Reasoning behind c5 also quite straightforward. If I go king h1 down the road, I'm a little bit worried about something like rook a d8, followed by pawn takes pawn, and this pawn on d4 being very weak. So I go c5. Magnus plays queen c7, and here I go rook to c1. This is a prophylactic move designed to stop black from playing b6 here, because now after takes, I simply win this pawn on c6. So I go rook c1, trying to prevent black from playing b6 and opening the file, and now Magnus plays the move rook to e7. Here I go king h1, he goes rook f8, and now I play the move rook f3. At this point, we're playing a blitz game, but what I'm also trying to do here is just play sensible moves. Magnus goes knight d7, and now I decide to trade the knights. Now, this move maybe is not the best decision, but again, you don't want to fall way behind on the clock in the opening phase, and so I don't want to use a ton of time trying to come up with better moves. Now, knight e2 is, of course, a reasonable move, followed by rook to f1, as the knight guards both the pawns on d4 and f4, but I decide instead to trade the knights. Magnus takes back with the rook, and now I go knight to e2, protecting the pawn on the f4 square. Magnus plays rook f7, and now I go rook to e3, and here he plays this move rook e7. Now, one thing that Magnus is really, really good at, I would say better than almost any other player in the world, I mean, amongst a plethora of things that he's better at, is he's very good at sensing the moment to use time. Now, here Magnus was up 5 seconds on the clock, but he spent 30 seconds before playing the move rook to e7. Now, Magnus could have sacked the rook with rook takes pawn, and after takes, and rook to d1, queen d4. Black is actually completely fine here, because if I trade the queens, I can't capture the bishop, because of the classic ice skater checkmate on f1. And after takes, Black's pawn chain is very, very solid here. Bishop covers the e7 square, so I can't infiltrate. And if anything, Black should be better. Instead, Magnus decides to play the move rook e7 after a long think, and now I go g3 to overprotect this pawn on f4. Get b6 here, and now I trade and play the move queen to c3, trying to put pressure on both the pawns on c6, e6, and a5 all at the same time. Here, Magnus plays king to f7, and this is a move that Magnus played again after quite a bit of a think, and it is a fantastic move. As I mentioned during my live stream of the game, I thought this move was pure genius, because at this point, I already thought Magnus was under a lot of pressure here. These weak pawns everywhere, feels like white should be better, but king f7 simply guards the pawn on e6, and if I take this pawn on c6, now Black can play bishop takes pawn. The bishop guards the queen on b6 here, and after takes rook e1, you might think that the king is a little bit weak on f7, but after rook e8, both of D's rooks guard the pawn, and with the active queen in the center of the board, Black should not be worse. So instead, I play rook to d3, guarding the pawn on d4, intending to capture on c6. Magnus plays rook c8, and now I play this move knight g1. Now, this is a very slippery move by me, because what I'm trying to do is activate the knight to go to f3 and then hit either the e5 or g5 squares. Magnus goes rook c7, I play queen c5, and now he makes a fairly serious mistake by trading the queens. Now, keep in mind, Magnus is very low on time at this point, or I should say lower than me. He's trying not to spend too much time and get into time pressure, and he decides to trade the queens. Unfortunately here, for Magnus, now it becomes a game of, can Black bring the bishop back to f8, kick the rook out, and push the c-pawn, or am I going to get the bastion by jumping with the knight to e5 and creating the classic connect 4 first? Magnus goes rook a8 to guard the pawn on a5. I go knight to f3, and now he plays king to e7. Now, Black could play bishop f8 here, but after knight to e5, it looks very, very scary. The computer, of course, kind of laughs and says you go king to e8, takes, and after rook to c8 here, giving up another pawn on a5, Black can go rook to c7, followed by bishop b4, and suddenly the knight on a5 simply has no squares available to jump to. White would have to play b4, and after takes, and a move like rook c2, followed by rook a2. With a passive king on h1, unable to be activated, the weak pawn on a4, which probably will be captured soon. If anybody is better here, it would be Black. Instead, Magnus goes king to e7, and now after king to e7 here, I play this move. I play the move king g2. We get king d6, and I go rook c3. Another very important move here. If I move the rook to c2, Black is able to go c5, releasing this very, very weak pawn on c6. And now after takes, suddenly with the open diagonal, the passed d pawn that Black can start pushing, combined with ideas like rook b8 to pressure the pawn on b3. Once again, if anybody is better, it is Black. So rook c3 is important also because if I were to move my king over here, Black now take on d4, and after takes, king e6, takes. Black is a little bit better here because he can start pushing the pawns in the center of the board, and this pawn on b3 remains quite weak in the endgame. So I go rook c3 here. Rooks guard each other, so Black cannot take the pawn anymore. And now Magnus plays rook a6. I go king f2. We get rook b7. And I go knight to e5 here, trying to create the classic connect 4 and put tons of pressure on the pawn on c6. Now here, Magnus decides to make a very committal decision by trading the bishop for the knight. This move doesn't necessarily lose, but now it becomes very tricky for Black to play, because after I take, king to d7, and this move rook to f3. The center part of the board is very, very closed now, but I control the open file, and my rook on c5 always targets these pawns on a5 and c6 at the same time. Magnus goes king e7, I play king e2, and here he plays the move rook b4, trying to pressure my pawns on d4 and b3. I go rook d3, we get g5, now I play g4. I don't know if g5 is actually a mistake, but it's a move I really don't like, because now I can always swing the rook to h3 to also put pressure on the pawn on h7. As for me personally, I probably play something like h5 first, or something like h6 as well. Either way, probably not g5, allowing g4, because now the pawns are fixed, and this rook h3 is always a big issue. Magnus goes king d7. I play king d2, king c7, king c3, and now he plays this move king b6. Now, this is a fairly severe mistake by Magnus. What he should have played was rook to b6, putting pressure on the pawn on b3. And after king c2 and rook a6, the position is simply a draw because I can't move the rook away to go towards f7 because I hang the pawn on d4. And whenever I go king c3 to guard the pawn, let's just say rook a7, rook f3 here, this would be winning, but after rook b6, I have to always move the king. And the problem is I cannot guard this pawn on d4 without putting the king on c3, which always is met by rook a b6. Instead, Magnus blunders here by playing the move king b6, allowing me to play rook f3, and now I have achieved the dream. The rook is infiltrating on the f file. I have rook f6, rook f7, rook f8 incoming. Black's rook on b4 is actually not doing a whole lot here as my king dominates the rook, and I look like I'm well on my way to a victory. So here Magnus plays rook to a7. Now I go rook to f6, rook e7, and here I play rook f8. Magnus goes rook to b7, trying to stop me from checking the king from behind on the b8 square, and now I play his move rook c8. Magnus goes rook f7, and here I take. He goes king b7, and in this position, I miss my big opportunity. Now, keep in mind in the early title Tuesday, I had a very, very good position. I was winning for one move, but I missed that opportunity, and here I miss another opportunity. Now, to be fair, both of us are starting to get a little bit low on time, and in this position, I simply missed the winning move, which is rook takes pawn on a5. Now, the reason this move is winning is that while I sack the rook on c6, the rook on b4 is also going to be captured. One sample line is, say, rook takes d4 here, takes, and then I have rook to a6 check. The king goes back this way. I can simply check, and after king to e8, I can trade, go a5, king e7, a6, king d7, and a7. Pawn gets through, and I win the game. Now, it's worth pointing out that earlier in the game, I think in this position, I did see the move rook takes a5 here, but in this exact example, Black can sack his own rook on b3, and after takes, rook takes c6, rook f3, the position is probably a draw, because after king c2, there's king, I know king a4 or king b4 is best, let's just say takes, and king b5, followed by king to c4, going after the pawn on d4, and white is not winning. So I saw the idea of rook takes a5 a few moves earlier, but unfortunately in this position, I simply missed it. Now, if I had played rook a5, I would have won the game, but instead I play the move king b2. Now Magnus goes rook f2, I go king a3, and he plays the move rook f3. And unfortunately here, there is suddenly a lot of pressure on both the pawns on d4 and b3 at the same time. I check, king b8, check, king b7, and now I check, king b8, and play the move rook c3, because obviously I still don't want to make a draw. Magnus trades the rooks, and now he takes the pawn on d4. I go rook c6. He takes on g4. I take on e6. But after rook to h4, Magnus now has some chance potentially to try and win the game, as he is going to be pushing both the h and g pawns down the board. I go rook d6. We get takes. He goes g4. Now I go e6 here. If I were to play rook takes a5, I think after rook to h6, followed by rook g6 and g3, g2, it starts getting very dangerous. White might still be okay here, but it is starting to feel extremely dangerous, and it is likely that I could lose the game in this position. So I go e6. Magnus plays rook to e2 here. I go rook g5, not rook takes a5, because once again, after rook e6, rook g5, rook g6, Black is simply pushing p and going to win the game. So I go rook g5, Magnus takes, I take, he plays h5, and now I play his move rook h4. Now I could have played rook to g5 here, attacking both of the pawns at the same time on h5 and a5, but after rook h6 takes h4, let's say rook d5, h3, rook d1, h2, rook h1, and rook to h3 here with the passive rook behind this pawn on h2, Black is simply drawing the game very easily. He can simply wait forever, even if I'm somehow able to get this position, let's say check and king b7. Again, with the rook being unable to come into the game and the king cut off by his fourth rank, one sample line, let's say king here, Black can just check forever and start checking. And whenever the king gets to e4, now there's rook to h5, and Black will win both of these pawns in return for giving up the pawn at h2, and the game will end in a draw. So I play rook h4, Magnus goes rook h6, and now I force a draw with this move b4, trading off the a and the b pawns. We get the trade, king b7, king c5, king a6, king d5, king a5, king e5, rook b6, king f5, rook b4, and now after takes, king a4, the game is effectively a draw. Now I would play on for 50 moves, in this position. We would get to move number 122 here with king and rook versus king and rook before the game was drawn by a 50-move rule with no pieces being captured or progress being made. But the game was a very exciting game from start to finish. So I drew Magnus in the early Title Tuesday. In this evening Title Tuesday, I also was doing very well against him, but both games ended peacefully and neither side was able to win. That being said, despite drawing Magnus and failing to convert either of my two advantages in the Title Tuesdays yesterday, I still did win both the events. Now to keep in mind, I got very, very lucky. In the early Title Tuesday, I survived my opponent's miss of a mate and won against Brood McCarran, and I am from Armenia. And then the evening Title Tuesday, I was losing 3 games in the event, but somehow I managed to win all 3 of them, and I was able to emerge victorious in both the events to win my 70th and 71st Title Tuesday. So, on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed these recaps from Title Tuesday, both my games against Magnus Carlsen in yesterday's recap and now today's recap. At any rate, if you guys are big fans of the channel and you're not subscribed yet, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we will be back soon with some more great recaps. See you guys. Bye.